Hello, and welcome to Philosophy Talks. For my first video, I want to discuss the topic of faith with you. More specifically, though, I want to talk to you about faith through the lens of which my old pastor looked at it. See, when I was a young child, Baptist, I would go to church every Sunday with my sister and my mom for about 2 hours, and for 30 minutes of those 2 hours, I would sit down in the pews with people just like me, listening to my pastor as he would lead us through our journey with Christ. And one day, he wanted to talk about faith. He said in his talk that faith can be found everywhere, that we display it all the time, that, in fact, every time you step onto an airplane, you display faith that this airplane and the pilot controlling it will be able to bring you from your current location to your desired destination safely. Now, if you're really paying attention to the specifics of the argument my pastor put forth here, you would realize that he just made a conflation between faith and trust. This, while not as egregious as the almost purposeful and blatantly manipulative claim that religion is somehow comparable to science, is a view that is harmful in its own right and is much more widely propagated than I think you would find the conflation between science and faith. And in a way, I can see why. Because faith is somewhat akin to trust. Faith, in fact, is trust, so long as you add the very important adjective of blind before it. See, trust in its original form is earned. There are reasons for it. Perhaps trust might not always be logical, but trust is earned. And when it is not, when trust is blind, when it is given without reason, without thought, this is what we call faith. And when you conflate the two of them together, you create an environment where people are using faith to justify their religions, while simultaneously thinking of their faith as something far more reasonable than it actually is. And to demonstrate this and redeem my younger self for falling into this argument when it was originally posed to me, I would like to take a page from my pastor's book and demonstrate to you the difference between blind trust and the trust that we normally display through the lens of boarding an airplane. So I ask of you, think for a moment about all of the things you know before boarding a plane. What justifies the trust you hold in it, hold in the pilot maybe? I'm going to come up with a few myself, and we're going to commune and together explore what our trust in an airplane actually looks like. See, the first thing I think about when I'm pondering what I know about an airplane is, of course, its position before takeoff and after takeoff. Where is the plane doing the taking off and landing? Because I personally would not board an airplane just leaving from anywhere. It's leaving from an airport. When you purchase your tickets, you know the departure position and the landing. You know where it's going to be taking off from. You know where you're going. You can Google Maps it. You probably have to if you don't know the way to the airport. And in today's day and age, if you so desire, you could even Google Earth it and see exactly where you're going before you even step into the building. And this, I think, is a very crucial step toward gaining your trust. You know that you're not going to some backwater boony place that's going to get you kidnapped the second you leave your car. What else do you know, though? Because you know a lot more than just where it takes off. You also know when you purchase your ticket what company you're going to be flying with. And all of us know what the bad companies look like. We all know the companies we prefer, and if you see somebody take one of those companies that you know has a bad reputation, you're going to look at them oddly. And if they're your friend, you're probably going to tell them not to take the flight in the first place. And when you get to the airport and you check in with whichever company you're going with, you then go through security. And this is maximally important. When you go through security and you get to the other side, you know before you board the airplane exactly what kind of security other people are going to have to go through. When you go to a smaller airport, you're looking at putting all of your clothes, your shoes, your jackets in separate baskets, and then putting your bag on a conveyor belt to get scanned. You're going to have to take out all of your electronics, put them in a different basket, and then you're going to have to go through a metal detector. And if you're going to a big airport, you go through a full body scanner where you have to hold your hands up and they see everything on you before you even get to go to the gate to board your airplane. And when you get through with that, you have security that if somebody wishes to do you criminal harm in the confines of the airplane you're about to be boarding, they're going to have to do some creative stuff. They're not just going to be able to walk in and hijack your plane. It's going to take some effort. It's going to take something creative, something smart. And it's not likely, considering the extreme efforts they go through to make sure nobody's carrying anything illicit on them. And then once you go to the gate, you also get to sit down while waiting for your plane and watch all of the other planes come in and land and take off. You get to see multiple of them before your plane lands. Depending on how early you get there, you can watch tens of them go. Physical evidence, visual, right in front of you, that planes can and do make these flights all the time. You get to see it with your own eyes that these things work. Even if you don't understand how they work, you can still find physical evidence that they do. This goes a long way toward gaining your trust. Would you trust an airplane if you haven't seen others fly before? If this was the first airplane flight, would you be getting on it? Probably not. And while we're at it, what do we know about the things that go into making an airplane in the first place? Now, I don't know all of the specific regulations that go into it, and I'm not going to cheat to find them out. But what I do know is that the companies that are making these commercial airplanes, like Boeing, they are being designed by engineers who are checking over each other to make sure that this plane is properly designed, properly built. And once the plane is built, it goes through tests. They don't just let airplanes go into commercial use right out of the basket. They perform a lot of tests on it. Now, once again, I don't know exactly what these tests entail, so I'm not going to cheat because when I board an airplane, I'm not directly thinking about all of the tests they have to perform. Remember, we are attempting to simulate the trust we actually display in an airplane. So if I'm not about to look them up before boarding a plane, I'm not going to look them up now just to make a point, but I do know that they do have tests for them and that they are required and upheld. So before getting on the plane, I also know that intelligent people designed it. I know that the designs were tested. And then when the plane is about to take off, I also know that it is being flown by a pilot who has had his own rigorous tests to make sure he's competent. A lot of hours of flying, probably with a lot of different planes. He knows his stuff. He can get us there safely, and I'm not just putting faith in him. I'm not just blindly trusting him. I know that he had to go through a lot of hoops to get the license he needs to have to fly us. And once you board the plane and you sit down in your seat, the last thing I think most people know is that the plane comes with safety features in case something goes wrong. There's a pamphlet right in front of you. You can take that pamphlet and see with your own eyes all of the safety features that were implemented in the specific plane you've boarded. There are air masks in case the hull gets breached. They have inflatable vests beneath your seats in case you have to crash land in water. And before the plane takes off, flight attendants, who also make these flights all the time safely, get up in front of you and demonstrate physically how to perform the different requirements necessary to activate and efficiently use these specific safety features. So, while we all know that surviving a plane crash is not a likely thing to happen, these safety features, these air masks, these vests, the emergency exits that are also built into the plane, these all go a long way toward making you feel safe. And if the plane didn't have any safety features, think to yourself, just this one thing being different, would you feel comfortable boarding it? And we're going to find out your answer to exactly that, because we are going to go over what I think a plane flight would have to look like in order for you to actually have boarded it on faith alone. What would it take for your boarding of a plane to be based on blind trust? Well, I'm going to have to get extremely hypothetical about that because such a situation does not exist in real life. So, you are planning on going on a flight with you and the rest of your family. It's going to be across the ocean to a different country, and all of the flights that you find are extremely expensive. Of course, you're going over the ocean. It's a long flight. There's a lot of you going. It's gonna be expensive. Well, I've got news for you, because a spokesperson came to me yesterday, and I'm going to tell you about the business opportunity he just posed. See, his company is willing to give you a flight, all of you and your family members, $40 flat. Just you, all your family, and one large suitcase each, $40, that's it, round trip. Now, if this isn't already ringing alarm bells in your head, I will continue and tell you some more features about this amazing opportunity for you, because, look, the airplane doesn't have any regulations. What I mean by that is anything that is guaranteed to you normally will now be up in the air. The engineers who build all of the airplanes we get on commercially are not required for this airplane. Now, I'm not telling you that the people building the airplane aren't engineers. I'm just saying that the company described by this spokesperson does not require their engineers to be trained. They don't require the builders of this plane to have a degree. They don't require them to meet all of the qualifications that would normally have to be met to build this plane. And the tests for the plane, once they're built, well, they're optional. We don't know if they actually perform the test. Tests are expensive. It would be much easier to not do the tests, so we're not going to require them to test it. But they could if they wanted to, and the spokesperson guaranteed me that it's totally safe. And while we're at it, the pilot doesn't have to have his license. The company doesn't really care. If the person looks maybe like they can fly a plane, they'll let them in. And there's no security before you get on to the plane. In fact, This is how it's going to work. If you give me the $40 right now, I'm going to go to the spokesperson, give him the $40 for his company, and he is going to give me a blindfold for every single member of your family that's going with you on this trip. And you are all going to be required to wear this blindfold throughout the entirety of your journey. See, you're going to schedule a time with me right now, and I will communicate that to the company. And when that time arrives, they are going to send someone over to collect you. You're going to all put your blindfolds on, get in the car. They're going to drive you to the spot, board you onto the airplane, fly you to your destination, and once they leave, you will then take off your blindfold. All of your luggage will be right there for you, and then you will continue on with your vacation and board it again when it's time to go back. Same method. Now, if you listened to all of this and you are still amenable to the idea of flying on this airplane, you would arguably be boarding this plane on faith alone. And the reason I say arguably is because blind trust would actually take a little bit more than this in reality. See, we already know that planes do work, so we have prior experience with planes being operable, flyable. So in order to board a plane on faith alone, you would have to have no experience with planes whatsoever, both in the theoretical and the experiential way. You wouldn't be able to know anything about them, wouldn't have been able to experience them before yourself. It would have to be blind. But for the sake of being charitable, I would say that if you can board the plane that I gave you in the second example, that you would be close enough to boarding a plane on faith alone for me to have allowed this analogy to pass something as common as a sermon that my pastor gave. Now, I'm not even particularly saying that faith is bad. Obviously, it looks bad when you pose it toward a question like, would you board an airplane? Because generally speaking, we don't have faith in things that we can test and experience for ourselves. But for more abstract concepts, there are plenty of philosophers out there who come to the conclusion that there are certain premises that you must have faith to accept, and that most everybody accepts them. In fact, many of them would even argue that you have to accept them to have any legitimate grasp on reality itself. The problem comes when you have faith, but think of it as something that it's not. You must accept that faith isn't bound by reason, that it isn't bound by logic, that it wouldn't stand up to these rigorous standards we apply toward more logical things, like trust and science. And as long as you keep making this error of conflation between trust and blind trust, faith and trust, you're going to have a very hard time understanding what it actually is that you're utilizing to justify your religion. So, with that being said, I hope you all have a great day, and I will see you in the next one.